Yeah, that was funny. It
was funny, like the timing too of it, where it's like right when you started talking about policy right and childhood separation and stuff like that.
Couldn't ask for like a better time.
You want this one?
Commissioners, I call this regular meeting of the Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission for January 7th, 2019 to order. We'll start this meeting as we do every meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As we do not have a chair and vice chair of the commission yet, since this is the first meeting we have of the year, I will go ahead and start the meeting. My name is Jason McCoy. I'm the Supervising Transportation Planner with Public Works. I'm also the Secretary for the Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission. Joining me are the Clerk of the Commission, and that's Jennifer Schmidt. She currently has a small case of laryngitis, so joining her is our transportation intern, and that's Treasurer Acevedo. She'll be providing you with the oath of allegiance for public officers, which she'll go ahead and give right now.
Please repeat after me. I say your name.
I, Valerie Zimmer,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear truth, faith, and allegiance to the Constitution
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution
of the United States and the Constitution
of the United States and the Constitution
of the State of California,
of the State of California,
that I will take this obligation freely,
that I will take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose
without any mental reservation or purpose
of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge
that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations, guys. Welcome.
Commissioners, we will, congratulations first of all. We'll go ahead and take this opportunity to allow each of the commissioners to introduce themselves, not only to those in the chamber right now, to each other, as well as to those who are currently watching at home. So one at a time, beginning with Commissioner Parker. Go ahead and please state your name, and give some facts about you for members of the audience.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jamison Parker. In my day job, I am the Director of Advocacy and Capital Improvements at the Midtown Association. That's a property business improvement district in Midtown Sacramento. I've lived in West Sacramento for about 2 years. About 6 months ago, my fiance and I went down to one car, so I'm a huge proponent of active transportation. I like to bike to work. It takes me about 15 minutes, and why I'm here on the commission this evening. So.
Hi, everybody. I'm Asher Ghani. I just moved to West Sacramento about 6 months ago, so I'm just looking to get involved in my community. I also bike to work every. Oh, there it is. Okay. I also bike to work every day, and by day I actually work in innovation and economic development for the city of Sacramento.
Hi, everyone. I'm Valerie Zimmer. I am also a new resident of West Sacramento of about 6 months. I live in the neighborhood of Bright. I'm an engineer and a geologist. I work for the state of California as a water resources control engineer. I also like to bike to work. I'm interested in open space, and I'd like to see people be able to get around. So I'm concerned about some of the stuff in my neighborhood and what I see, and I'm excited to get involved with my local community. So thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Hirsch. I work as a deputy legislative counsel for the past 4.5 years, which is essentially the attorneys for the state legislature. I've lived in West Sacramento for the past 4.5 years as well. And besides my day job, I have served as the chair and vice chair of this commission previously. I've also served on the Age-Friendly Advisory Committee and the Environmental and Utilities Commission. And I serve with the West Sacramento Friends of the Library, which is having a book sale later this month. Thank you.
Hi there, my name's Mark Paul Hemus. I've been a West Sacramento resident for the past 2 years. Professionally, I work for a land use, real estate economics, and economic development consulting firm. In 2012-2014, I worked with the nonprofit Walk Sacramento, implementing a Safe Routes to School project here in the city. So I am eager to join this commission to come full circle and hopefully implement some of the projects that we had recommended and also advised on during that time.
Hello, I'm Ashley Crispin Kaufman. In my day job, I actually run a tech startup with my husband. When I am not here, I also volunteer with a organization called Sprite Tech Labs, which teaches STEAM to children using video game design, as well as serving as a board member for SAC Developers Collective. I'm very excited to be here because I truly believe that we need to support our current infrastructure while planning for the future. And in a society where currently families feel a lot of stress financially, having a car can actually be an economic burden. So I'd like to continue to help us find other ways for those families to have the mobility to get around the city and to get to work.
Good evening. My name is Merlin Love, which I promise is in fact my birth name. During the day, I'm most often found as an executive for a drone company out of the Bay Area, working in the software space for technologies in construction, mining, agriculture, and engineering, with an emphasis on disruption in regards to the way things have or haven't been done for quite some time. I'm a firm believer that the tenacity of an idea doesn't necessarily instill it with value, so the opportunity to serve on this commission and see how we as a group can advise and recommend ways in which the city can be efficacious and advanced in the implementation of technologies and various efficiencies, particularly in the green space, are something of particular interest to me.
Thank you, Commissioners. This time we'll proceed to item 1C and the general administration function, which is part 1 on your agenda. This is consideration of selection of the chair and vice chair. Typically, how we proceed with this is members of the commission will either nominate another commissioner or nominate themselves. There can be some discussion amongst yourselves for both consideration of chair and vice chair. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to the commission to proceed with that discussion.
I mean, I think,
I think based on the previous experience that Alex brings to the commission, I'd like to forward my nomination for Alex Hirsch to be our commission chair.
Well, I would accept that nomination. Thank you.
Do we have a second for that nomination?
I'll second that.
At this time, we're going to proceed with a roll call. So if the commissioners would each state aye or nay to the proposal on the table. We'll go ahead and start with Commissioner Parker.
Aye.
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 Hey, the ayes have it, it's unanimous. Commissioner Hirsch is now Chairman Hirsch. This time, Commissioner, Mr. Chair, if you'd like to take this over, we can entertain nominations for Vice Chair.
Sure, and thank you, Mr. McCoy, for doing such a good job at starting off tonight's commission meeting. And thank you, fellow commissioners. I'm very grateful to have your support and look forward to working with each and every one of you for the next 2 years. At this time, we have a motion. Is there anyone who would like to be nominated as vice chair? Or any discussion amongst ourselves beforehand?
Can I clarify, are these appointments of chair and vice chair 1 year out of the 2-year term?
That is correct.
Anyone interested in the vice chair position?
For vice chair, if you guys want to give it.
Sure, I would be happy to.
May I also add that if you decide to change the term to 2 years, you may also do that.
I don't know if the proper discussion would then be, do we talk about the terms first, or do we finish the vice chair nomination?
I think at this time it'd be appropriate to continue with selection of the vice chair, and at that point you can choose to bring up term limits or extending that out to 2 years.
With that in mind, if you decide to do 2 years.
Thank you.
I'd make a motion to recommend Ashley as our vice chair to the commission.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for Commissioner Chrisman Kaufman to be vice chair. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, do we do a voice vote for this one as well?
It would be up to the chair.
In that case, I'll just do ayes and nays. All those in favor of Commissioner Chrisman Kaufman as vice chair, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it and the motion carries. I suppose our final discussion then before moving on is, do we want to make the term limits 1 year or 2 year?
Mr. Chair, just a quick point of order. Typically, we play musical chairs at that time, so if we could have the new vice chair sit directly to the right of the chair, we would appreciate it.
Vice Chair Chrisman Kaufman, do you want to say anything of thank you or congratulations?
I actually just want to say thank you, everyone, and I promise that I will do my best.
In that case, the final discussion on this item, do we want to stay with the existing terms of 1 year, or do we want to make these terms for 2 years? And I'll say, in my past experience on this commission and other commissions, it's always been 1 year terms. So, was there any discussion amongst the commissioners of whether they would prefer 1 year or 2 years for these terms?
I agree to keep it at 1 year to grant somebody else an opportunity to become either chair or vice chair during this 2-year term.
We have a motion from Commissioner Polhemus for a 1 year term. Is there a second?
Second.
A second from Commissioner Love. All those in favor of one-year terms, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on the agenda then to item 1D, presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the commission. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments this evening?
No.
No, thank you. Moving on to the final item on the general administration function of the agenda, item 1E, commission communications. Commissioners, are there any communications at this time? Seeing and hearing none. Moving on then to the next portion of the agenda, which is the consent agenda. We have one item on it, consideration of approval of the minutes of the December 3rd, 2018 Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission meeting. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve?
We have a motion to approve from Vice Chair Chrisman Kaufman. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Parker.
Thank you.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Moving on then to the regular agenda, we have one item, item 3, consideration of an update on the West Capitol Avenue Road Rehabilitation and Safety Improvement Project. And I believe there's a staff report at this time.
Testing, testing. This is my first presentation with the city of West Sacramento, so I'm finding my way around. Thank you for your patience. My name is Candido Ramirez. I'm a senior civil engineer for the city of West Sacramento, Department of Public Works. And with me is Vin Kay. He's a senior supervising engineer for also the Department of Public Works. He's here to help me answer any questions which I need help on. So this presentation is on the West Capitol Avenue Road Rehabilitation and Safety Enhancement Project. The project limits, as you can see on your screen there, extend from Enterprise Boulevard on the west end, and they go to Jefferson Boulevard on the east end. There is a dogleg portion along Jefferson Boulevard, which extends further to Park Boulevard. The total project length is about 3 miles. Okay. Let me see here. I think this is backwards.
it's a little bit touchy, so if you roll the mouse ball, it usually helps.
You need to go back to the front here. Okay. I apologize. Here you go. Okay. Let's see, what's the best way here? I'll go to this matrix here. Oops, apologize. Gosh. Okay. No, it keeps. Okay, here you go. You got it? Okay. So this table breaks down the project by by the type of features which we're proposing along the project. The most important one is the second row, which is titled Vehicle Lanes. And starting from the first segment, which is from Enterprise Boulevard to Interstate 80, it'll consist of one lane in each direction plus a left turn lane, or turn lane. The second segment is from I-80 to Harbor, and it will consist of 2 lanes in the eastbound direction and also 1 lane in the westbound direction, along with a turn lane. The remainder of West Capitol Avenue segment will consist of 2 lanes eastbound direction and 2 lanes in the westbound direction, along with a left turn lane and existing median islands where they exist. Jefferson Boulevard is also has the same configuration: 2 lanes northbound, 2 lanes southbound, along with left turn pockets. I need to take this moment and correct an inconsistency that was presented in the staff report, which is on page 3. And that is, you may or may not have page 3 of the report with you, but if you go under the overall lane configurations, the second through 4th bullets describe the project a little different than what I just described. So the correct lane configuration is what's on this table here and what I explained. But I'll be glad to clarify even further if necessary. Okay, so continuing on, the most of the project will include pavement restoration, striping, selected pedestrian crossings, and also selected ADA ramp upgrades. It'll also close some sidewalk gaps that currently exist along the corridor. The last piece is also consistent along the entire corridor, are adding communication conduits so they can accommodate primarily fiber optic for traffic signalization and for communication. If we skip down to the 3rd row, which is labeled Class 2 bike lanes, that's essentially what the project will have along the entire segment of West Capitol Avenue, except for Jefferson Boulevard. So, and I'll explain that exception a little later in the presentation. But along West Capitol Avenue, what you'll see is for the most part, a travel lane, a buffered bike lane, which will, buffered bike area, I'm sorry, which will vary from 2 to 6 feet. And then next to it, you'll see the bike lane, the actual bike lanes, which will vary from 4 to up to 8 feet in some cases, okay? The other piece, safety enhancement piece of the project is adding lighting. Street lighting does exist along most of the corridor on both streets, with the exception of the segment west of Harbor. So between Harbor and Enterprise. Lighting is minimal or non-existent. So it's an important feature that we have to add with this project. The next row here is street parking. We are currently proposing to keep the no parking, no stopping designation that exists along the entire corridor. However, later in the presentation, we'll talk about an option to possibly add parking in a limited segment. The last piece of this project is underground infrastructure, which is important that we implement now to avoid tearing up the road in the future and reconstructing everything above the water pipeline in this case. Okay. So now I'll give you a background and an update of the project. In 2007, the city of West Sacramento prepared the West Capitol Avenue Streetscape Master Plan, which was phased in about, I think, 4 phases. And the first phase was constructed soon after that, and it extended from Grand Avenue to Jefferson Boulevard. And what was implemented was a true streetscape project, and it's what you see in front of City Hall now. What we're now proposing is not a streetscape project. I want to make that clear. It's mostly safety enhancement project. So it will not have all the landscaping and all the hardscape features that you see in front of us. In 2016, city staff applied for a first grant through SACOG. It was a transportation grant, and that's essentially what gave the momentum to kick off the project subsequent to the phase 1. In July of 2017, staff presented conceptual ideas in anticipation of developing a scope for the project. And a similar presentation was made to this TMI Commission and also City Council. Moving forward to April of 2018, City Council then approved the engineering design contract to select a consultant to proceed with the project. So that consultant's been aboard since then, and in the last 7 months, from May through December, you see a list of activities that have taken place, which is a lot of public outreach, developing the environmental document and all the supporting documents that are necessary to move this project forward. We evaluated alternatives for different design features along the project, and we're currently at 60% design, and are proceeding with the next phase very soon. Okay, here's a list of the funding sources that are that we've retained or have tapped to make this project viable. And the first two are Regional Surface Transportation Program and Highway Safety Improvement Program are through SACOG. And so is the last one, the Regional Funding Program. The last one was the city was recently selected for, but it hasn't been formally awarded to the city. And so those are the federal or state grants. The other funds that you see, for the most part, are local matching grants or funding sources. Total of these sources is about $6.4 million. The goal of this project is simple. It is to improve safety and mobility for all users, okay? And that's pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicle users. So that's the ultimate goal. And the way we're going to hopefully accomplish that goal is by rehabilitating the existing pavement, which is inferior in some places, better in others. We're going to do some lane modifications, especially for the segment closest to us. We're going to modify and add some bike lanes along the way. We're going to restripe the pedestrian crossings that currently exist, and will likely add a couple of other crossings along the way. We're going to reconstruct some of the curb ramps that need upgrading, especially those nearest to, those adjacent to the pedestrian crossings. And the next item is we're going to upgrade or improve the Jefferson and Merkley signalization infrastructure. As I mentioned earlier, a portion of the project, about a third of it, will get new street lighting. And let's see, the last piece there is limited sidewalk replacement or upgrades. Some incidental but essential improvements are underground conduits for fiber optic signal interconnects, some fiber optic communication. Those are all under the conduits, I'm sorry. The other underground improvement is water pipelines. Both of these segments that you see there are old pipelines that need replacement, but they also need to be upgraded so they can convey the right fire flow and keep the community as safe as possible. So the first one there, 12-inch water line, is from Jefferson to West Acre, which is 1,000 feet. The second one is a 16-inch water line from I-80 to Enterprise. That's about 4,000 feet. Okay, this is a screenshot of the layout that was prepared for the 60% plans. And as you can see there on the lower right-hand corner, we cut the word West Acre off, but it's the intersection of West Acre and West Capitol Avenue. So that's fairly typical of what you'll see throughout the project. I'll follow this with a cross-sectional view in a second here. But again, it has 2 lanes in each direction. The buffered width between the travel lanes and the bike lanes, that's shown in the chevron signs. Striping, I'm sorry. The green shading that you see there are conflict zones between the existing driveways and cyclists. So we felt that those are important to highlight on this plan, but also in the field, to make both users alert of that potential interaction and hopefully minimize the possibility of incidents. The blue shading are driveways, existing driveways that we will retain, will keep access to. And the red shading that you see represent existing driveways that are clearly not being used or abandoned, and you can see that because there's obstructions or there's a chain that's blocking that driveway. So they've been abandoned for a while, they're not being used now. So the plan is to keep them abandoned, but not to replace them as part of this project, not to reconstruct the sideway or driveway. Okay, so if you were standing over at, let's say Rayleigh's, and you were looking in this direction towards City Hall, this is what you would see. Starting from the left-hand side, you would see an 8-foot bike lane, an 8-foot buffer, 11-foot travel lane, then a 14-foot travel lane, followed by that center median. And then on the south side, it's essentially symmetrical to the north side. A couple travel lanes, a buffered area, and the bikeway. So the title of this says recommended. This is what staff is currently recommending to implement. And the next one here is an option that was brought up in July of 2017, or at least mentioned. There was some discussion of allowing parking, street parking. And so this graphic shows that street parking. Again, on the left-hand side, 8-foot parking followed by a bike lane. And then what happens here is that the buffer gets narrow. It becomes 2 feet instead of 8 feet on the previous graphic. And the rest is the same, a couple of travel lanes in each direction. I got it. Okay. In the earlier matrix, I mentioned that on Jefferson Boulevard, the staff was recommending not to include bike lanes, and that was because back in July of 2017, when we presented the idea of adding bike lanes, we presented it as a shared bike lane, which means the vehicles and cyclists literally share the lane. So the vehicles have to look out for cyclists, and so there's added risk and safety issues when that happens. And so council was not in support of that, and they suggested rerouting cyclists to use other ways, which is Riverfront or West Acre for northbound cyclists. And frankly, we shared that same concern and that opinion. However, we felt we had to complete due diligence and to see if separated bike lanes could be accommodated, and that's what this represents. This is an optional for Jefferson Boulevard. Again, you can see the bike lanes. They're shown in shade in green shading, this is the section that you see is probably the best section. If you go to the right, which is north of Merkley, the lanes get narrow, 10 to 11 foot lanes. And then if you go to the left-hand side, which is south of that on-ramp, it's the same thing. the existing roadways is limited, so the bike lanes become narrow also. Bike lanes and travel lanes, I'm sorry. This is another graphic. If you were standing in the middle of Jefferson and looking north from the US 50 underpass, for example, you can see there's a 6-foot bike lane there, but 6 foot includes the curb and gutter, and we end up with 11-foot travel lanes in each direction. I should note that for this segment, we will need some exceptions from Caltrans to incorporate some of these narrow travel lanes. We think we can obtain those exceptions. However, the risk and safety issues are still there, especially for cyclists. So this is a graphic of a typical bike lane, a buffered area, and the typical flexible delineators that we would place within that buffered area. And those typically help, they're not a physical barrier, but they help alert drivers of that separation. Public outreach has been extensive. I've been involved in numerous projects throughout my career, and I was thankful that my predecessors that were involved in this project scoped enough effort to reach out to the public, to and engage them and get their input up to this point. So it started off with some stakeholder meetings, which included businesses, the school district, the transit district, and that was back in August. And they were scheduled at times so that it was convenient to optimize on attendance for those meetings. So early morning or late afternoon meetings. We also had some pop-up workshops right along the corridor. The first one was in September. We had it at the west end of the project, right where the Yolo Causeway Bike Trail connects to West Capitol Avenue. We set up a tent there, several displays, and we intercepted a lot of cyclists there go in both directions, to Davis and from Davis. And that was highly successful. I was impressed with the turnout and the feedback that we got from that workshop. The second workshop was a couple of days later. That was at Joey Lopes Park, just west of Sycamore. We felt that we would get enough input from people that congregate there and perhaps use that bus stop. And again, we got some very good feedback from all those participants. In early October, we arranged a community meeting downstairs, and the attendance was impressive also. We have a list of comments that we received from all users, cyclists, pedestrians, and just people in general. The last item here that you see is a virtual community workshop, which was held online, and that garnered over 300 comments from the community, and we've combed through all the comments, and I feel that we've incorporated on these set of plans. They represent what the community wants and needs, and I hope that's the case. Here's a list of the environmental documents that I mentioned earlier. These are the documents that are typically required in grant-funded projects. So the majority of them are complete. There are two that are being reviewed by Caltrans, and the one that's highlighted there is the main primary document. It's called Initial Study Mitigated Negative Declaration. So that's currently in our court to review, and we're going to review it and get back to the consultant as soon as possible, and hopefully we can proceed on with the next step. And the next step is to, once all those comments, our comments are addressed, and we all feel that the document represents what the city needs, the community needs, we will circulate it by the end of this month, and it has to undergo a public review comment period of 30 days. So by the time that's done, it'll be March of 2019 before we can certify that document. And if that goes well as planned, we will bid the project between April and May, and hope to start construction by June of this year. So this is where we're looking for your input, recommendations, but also we can ask any questions you may, answer any questions you may have. But what we're looking for is an opinion on whether to allow parking, street parking, on West Capitol Avenue between Jefferson and Poplar, because that's the only place where there is enough real estate or enough road width to accommodate street parking. I do need to point out that right now, most of the corridor is signed, no stopping at any time. That's the sign that you see predominantly along most of the corridor. So by allowing parking, it'd be a modification to that, to a contradiction to those signs. So staff currently does not recommend parking, but it's still an option to accommodate it. The second item is to, along Jefferson Boulevard, whether or not to stripe it to have separate bike lanes. Staff right now concurs and is in the same opinion with City Council, and that is not to stripe it for parking, for bike lanes. However, if you recommend, or if you feel you want to recommend for council to explore this, there is an option on the current plans to accommodate that. And the last item is to get your support on the overall support on the overall proposed travel lane configurations. That's it.
Well, Mr. Ramirez, thank you very much for the staff presentation. Before we begin our commissioner discussion, it is the time for requests to speak from the public. To my right, in front of the clerk, there is a timer. We would request that all public comments do try and be limited to 3 minutes. And we also recognize that for some, speaking in public can cause anxiety. So we request that there be no boos, catcalls, or applause from members of the audience or commissioner members. At this time, we have one request to speak from the public, Mr. Al Zagowski.
Good evening, thank you. I'm Al Zagowski, 2901 Denise Court. I lived in West Sacramento for 3 years. I'm a retired professional engineer, And as I said, I live in an area adjacent to Linden Drive, and the project that you're dealing with right now on West Capitol is not very similar, but somewhat similar to the project that was put in at Linden. And so being so close to it, I've been observing the project at Linden, and I could give you some feedback on that project. In particular, one thing bothers me. I'm going to use the word that was used by the engineer just now. He called it a flexible delineator. I'm not sure if that means anything to anyone. I call them slats. And these slats look like the slats on a Venetian blind. And so if you drive along the reconstructed Linden Road, you'll see slats, usually 3, perhaps 4 of them, adjacent, coming out into the street, I guess with some intention to give some warning that this is where the parking will take place. But as I have been driving along over these many months, I see a large percent of these slats have been knocked over, and they look ugly, but I mean, it's only telling one part of the story. The part of the story that is not being told is why they are being knocked over, and they're being knocked over because obviously vehicles are hitting them. In fact, you can see some of these delineators that haven't been knocked over have marks where they have been hit. So it seems that cars that are driving along, perhaps on a night when it's foggy and it's not well lit, they're suddenly going to be coming along and they hit this delineator, which may, well, of course, it'll damage the delineator, may slightly damage the car, may scare the hell out of the people who are driving. I know that since I've been in the Sacramento area, I've only been in one accident, and it was in Sacramento, and it was because they had a similar situation that that when a bus was pulling out and those things were there, I suddenly didn't have, and the lighting wasn't good and it was bad weather. I didn't have enough time to figure out what was going on, and I wound up damaging my vehicle. I think this idea of putting an object in the middle of a roadway is not a safe approach. I don't think it adds anything to safety, and I think it detracts from the safety. I don't believe there should be anything in the roadway that could cause a vehicle to strike it or to surprise a driver in inclement weather. And so this is particularly aimed at the discussion of these slats or these flexible delineators which are coming out into the street. And so I think the first thing that I would like is to, one, if you're going to continue keeping them on Linden, to repair them. But I would prefer that they be removed. I don't think they serve a purpose, and they're just going to be a maintenance item, and I think they're a dangerous item. I think now as far as the current project goes, do I have to stop talking, or could I continue?
Since you're the only member of the public today, I'll say a few more minutes would be okay.
Thank you. So as far as the new project goes in West Capitol, they're talking about flexible delineators. Once again, I don't think that they really add any safety to it. If you're going to hit it, you're going to hit it. If you're not going to hit it, you're not going to hit it. If it isn't there, it's not going to make any difference. To have a big, wide space between the bike lane and the driving lane is, I think, adequate safety. And just these flexible things, I mean, they give at best, they give a false sense of safety, because if a driver sees somebody in a bike lane, he sees that there, and he says, okay, and you get a little closer, well, he goes over, he hits it, and, big deal, he's going to hit the bike ride. I mean, it's not going to offer any safety at all. Going ahead with things like painting the bike lane green makes it very, very obvious, and leaving a wide space makes it very, very obvious. So the bottom line of what I'm saying is I'd like to suggest that in the future project, as well as the current project at Linden, that these flexible delineators be removed for both aesthetic and safety reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zagowski, and thank you for your time coming today. Well, Commissioners, at this point, having heard public comment and the staff report, it is open for commission discussion. Does any commissioner want to start with any questions or comments? Or are there any questions or comments? Commissioner Zimmer.
have a few questions. Just looking at your plan, I get the impression that you are removing lanes in certain areas. Is that true on the project?
Yes, the lane modifications or moving lanes, like you put it, will occur from Jefferson, close to the intersection to us, to Sycamore. And that, there currently exists 3 lanes in each direction, and the current traffic volumes and even the ultimate traffic volumes that are modeled do not justify the need to have 3 lanes. So 2 lanes is appropriate for now and also for the future, and that's why we're taking advantage of that added, that existing real estate and accommodating these bicycle lanes.
Okay, so the removal of the lanes is allowing you to build the bicycle lanes?
Yes.
Yeah, and is that also true west of I-80? Is that also what's going on out there?
No, there's a slight modification there, and that's what the project is proposing to, is from Enterprise to I-80, is to have 1 lane in each direction, plus a left turn lane. So what exists out there now is in the westbound direction, there are 2 lanes. So, so there's, it's not comparable to the lane modifications that we're doing here, but that's what's happening on the west end.
Okay, well, thank you for clarification.
Commissioner Zimmer, do you have any further questions or comments?
Got lots of questions.
The floor is yours if you'd like.
Okay, I'm just curious, what's the speed limit on West Capitol Avenue?
45? I don't know. I think it's 45. That's a good question.
So I saw in the notes here that there wasn't support for a Class 4 bikeway, and perhaps there's not room, and I'm curious if you could address that. That seems like a very high-speed boulevard, and that might be a concern of cyclists.
Good evening, Commissioners. Vin Kay, the Public Works Department. We actually did an analysis earlier when we initially kicked off the project of an alternative of having a Class 4 along the north side of West Capitol Avenue. But based on feedback that we received from the users and the conflicts that would arise when we try to bring the users, back to the correct side of the road, it would be at uncontrolled crossings and short of adding signals in between, which is, beyond the cost of what this project can afford. And add to that the, driveways along West Capitol that would need ingress and egress, that it was not a viable alternative. But we did take a look at that.
Okay. I have one more question about pedestrian crossings. So I was driving along there tonight at dusk, and I noticed that there were pedestrian crossings, and a pedestrian actually crossed. And it was, at those high speeds, it was kind of hard to see that there was a pedestrian in the road and that the car that was in front of me was stopping because of pedestrian. So I was wondering if there was any sort of enhanced pedestrian crossing, any kind of blinking lights or anything like that considered in those areas.
We do have a plan to have flashing beacons on the higher volume crossings. And they would make sense to add them even at the lower volume crossings, especially with limited lighting, so.
The one major one is right at the Sycamore Trail. So in coordination with the Sycamore Trail Phase 1 and Phase 2 and 3, we are looking at that crossing right, to the north of Joey Lopes Park. Yes, we realize that, there may not be enough crossings, pedestrian crossings between Harbor, and West Acre. So, you know, what you see there, there's some existing mid-block crossings. Those are not ideal because they're not controlled. Where possible, we will try to enhance those crossings with additional lighting, and as you mentioned before, if we can, you know, add additional signage that alert drivers that this is where, you know, pedestrians cross, and perhaps even modifying the medians to direct the pedestrians so that they're facing oncoming traffic. We're trying to do that. But again, keep in mind, this is not a streetscapes project. So once we get into trying to reconstruct the road and re-landscape and actually change the construction of the street itself, we probably would need a budget 10 times what we have. So we are looking at safety enhancements throughout the entire corridor, but we would have to limit it to just, you know, certain crossings.
Thank you.
Are there any other commissioner questions or comments?
Yeah, I have some questions.
Commissioner Love.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, by the way. I thought it was incredibly informative. You mentioned that the total funding on this project was $6.4 million, give or take. And I was curious whether the budget informed the plan, or did the plan inform the budget? Did you go out and seek the money to represent the plan that you were kind of writing, or did you write the plan based off of the budget that you got? And that sort of tails off of the other commissioner's questions regarding things like enhanced crosswalks and things like that. I was just curious.
Well, I guess I would be best to attempt to answer that question. Candido's, you know, been with us only since April of last year. He's done a fine job. Actually, the project has sort of grown. Initially, we received grant funding, HSIP funding to add some lighting to the west of Harbor Boulevard, along with $3.3 million to purely just to rehabilitate the pavement between Harbor and Jefferson, with a portion of Jefferson Boulevard. And as we went into design, our executive team and our council and general public keep expressing that, yes, we would like to make this corridor safer, we would like to enhance it and make it even better, and which is the reason for that last grant that we went after. We are actually trying to do as much as possible given the fundings that we're able to attain. So I hope that answers that question. We did not go into this, trying to design a $50 million project over 3 miles long. So it kind of morphed from a road repair and some lighting enhancement project into trying to make it an even safer corridor for all types and all modes of transportation.
Yeah, so kind of a both is the answer. Specifically in regard to that, as that project's grown, and you both have mentioned a couple of times that this is not a streetscaping project, but I'm curious, how far ahead for the city does this plan take into account? How far ahead is this looking? Like these road repairs are expected to be sufficient for how long?
Well, we did in the traffic analysis, we actually looked at the ultimate build-out, and then we sort of looked ahead of what the interim traffic volumes would be before we made changes to the lane configurations. Now, as far as the road pavement rehab, from some segments, if we're just doing a seal coat, that is adequate for restriping, and that buys us 5 or 7 years of design life for that pavement surface. Where we're milling and overlaying, that gets us about 10 years of use. Keep in mind your pavement, your roadway is similar to your fencing or your deck. If you don't maintain it with a seal coat or stain, it continues to deteriorate with use. And especially the portions that are near harbor and where you have heavy trucking, they will continue to, deteriorate at a faster rate than the segments that do not have the heavy vehicle usage. So yes, to answer your question, we're looking about 10 years ahead for design life.
I get on the age of pavement. But what I was specifically more interested in was in regards to infrastructural changes on the corridor where you were adding bike lanes or taking away lanes or some such thing. And so as the growth curve of the city population continues in an upward trajectory and you're taking lanes away but adding bike lanes, that's what I was more curious about in regards to how far ahead you were looking in regards to traffic volumes, both in cars and volumes, and how long before you would suspect that we would be looking at this again sometime in the future, or another project that would replace this one, some 20 years, 30 years?
Well, that's why we did the traffic analysis. We believe that the changes we're making, namely the reduction of lanes over near Jefferson, we do not believe that's going to impact traffic volumes. Note the segment, to the east of Jefferson is currently 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction. The 6 lanes near the intersection of Jefferson is really excessive. We have excess right-of-way, which is why we're putting these wide buffers to try to separate the bikes from the cars. Now, further to the west, there are some locations where the pavement isn't, substantially wide enough. Perhaps further into the future, we may have to do some improvements. But looking at the traffic analysis, we believe the changes we're making are not adversely affecting traffic.
Okay. You mentioned that there was a part of one of the plans, and I think we're talking about the Jefferson bike lanes, where you'd have to get an exception from Caltrans regarding the buffer size. Generally speaking, why would Caltrans grant an exception like that? Because that's a safety exception that we're talking about, right? Their recommendation as a blanket is to not do that, and you'd have to say, we really, really want to. So I'd be curious, why would they grant an exception?
I think, I'm suspecting here, but the exception that we would be seeking would be to modify the outside travel lane close to the curb. That needs to be 12 feet. And the exception we would seek would be to make it 11 feet. And so that's the only thing they could grant us. Adding the bike lanes adjacent to the travel lanes is a risk that the city has to assume. I think the Caltrans would wash their hands and say, it's your baby. It's the city's, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it was...
With Caltrans, we work with Caltrans, and sometimes when we get encroachment permits to, redelineate lanes through one of their interchanges, it could vary. I think if you justify it one way or another, there's a possibility, but you are correct, due to the safety concerns, which is why staff is not recommending these reduced bike lanes. In reality, if you look at the cross-section, although it shows 6 feet, that includes a 2-foot gutter pan, which may or may not be ideal for cyclists, especially when you consider that's often has a drainage inlet that could, end up being a trap. So we are not recommending that option. And you are correct, because of the freeway interchange and the need for access, it's possible that, Caltrans may not be receptive to reducing the lanes there.
And even if they did, would we, as a city, assume the liability in case, like, someone decided to get litigious about something like that? You said Caltrans would wash their hands of it.
Right, which is why we're not recommending that.
Yeah, of course.
So.
Cool. I have just one last question regarding Mr. Sagovsky. I'm sorry, did I get that right? Perfect. Awesome. Mr. Sagovsky, I got it right the first time. Talking about flexible delineators in October, and I was curious if there was ever a study on the efficacy on those and whether or not the upkeep, maintenance, replacement is budgeted here or as part of the general city road fund.
I call them flexible delineators, and I may have misspoken. I apologize if I did, but I don't have the specifics. Typically, flexible delineators are
So there's,
They're not round, just a thin, quarter-inch thick, and they truly are flexible. These are, what's the right term?
Bollards?
Yeah, plastic bollards, but they do have some flexibility. But our consultant informed us that they were sturdier type bollards, so I don't know how much give they have or how much maintenance is required. So I can't fully answer that
Okay.
question. I can report back.
I will say those temporary delineators are relatively inexpensive to replace. The configuration that's on Linden, within the Linden Loop, is different than what we're proposing here for West Capitol Avenue. Linden has the parking pull away from the curb, and that parking is used to separate the bike lane from the single travel lane. The delineators are placed so that they're at the tail end of those parking stalls to, reduce the risk of someone rear-ending a parked car. So I don't think we have those issues for West Capitol Avenue, where we're proposing continuous buffers with the bollards and delineators in the middle.
great, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Sadowski.
I have one more question. About the buffers, the bollards. Does the city have a way to do street cleaning between the bollards? Is there a way to street clean in the bike lanes right now, or is there a plan for that?
We have that information, the widths of our sweepers, and we will, that's on our checklist of things to do, to check it, to make sure that they can accommodate
Okay.
the sweepers.
Okay, great, thanks.
If I could jump in and go ahead and answer. This is Jason McCoy, Supervising Transportation Planner. We did have a discussion on this. A similar situation is happening in the city of Sacramento, where they have the protected bike lanes, and they are smaller, and it's difficult for street sweepers to get in there. In fact, it's impossible to get around those vertical delineators. So what they've done is they're looking into providing specialty equipment that can go through and street sweep. Right now, for us to get in there, we have to hand sweep them, and then our street sweepers can go in and backtrack behind that into the main travel lane. We do not currently have the equipment for sweeping protected bike lanes, but that is something that we've had discussions about getting into, just like the city of Sacramento is.
Okay, thank you.
Other commissioner comments or questions?
I just have one. So I realize that you guys are not recommending parking on West Capitol. However, I take West Capitol quite frequently, and people do frequently park on West Capitol where they're not supposed to. So I'm just wondering, what would be the impact of adding parking? Like, what could potentially be the impact?
Well, parking adds a potential for conflict, especially with cyclists, right? If you're biking along a bike lane that's adjacent to the curb with a buffer, your only potential conflicts are going to result from the crossings of the driveways. By adding a row of parallel parking, the movements of the cars going in and out of those parking stalls will be another conflict that the cyclist is going to have to deal with if they're just trying to get past on West Capitol Avenue.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to see if it was a safety issue or a convenience issue. Thank you.
Other commissioner comments or questions?
Yes, I have a comment and question. So regarding Jefferson and using either wayfinding signage to direct cyclists off of Jefferson to either West Acre or east over to Riverfront, what plans are underway currently along 5th Street / River Road to improve that section between 15th Street and to Tower Bridge Gateway? I feel as a cyclist that rides to and from work every day on that segment there, that in the peak hours, that is just as potential for conflict as riding along Jefferson, or maybe not quite as bad, but motorists are still driving at about 45, 50 miles per hour there, especially when I'm returning home during the PM. So what improvements are planned or underway to safely advise cyclists to take that way?
Thank you, that's a good question. The city actually is working on a project along that corridor to widen that portion of Fifth Street between Bridge Street and 15th Street along Fifth Street there. That's part of the Riverfront Road Extension Project that would accommodate the streetcar vehicle maintenance facility. You know, that project that's currently in design right now, we are trying to coordinate with the overhead undergrounding that will be necessary in order to widen the east side of that street. So that is going to take a little bit more time, because frankly, we do not have enough funds to do those improvements. As you may be aware, it actually goes up against the columns that support the Pioneer Bridge. So we're actually trying to design a pedestrian path that goes around those columns that support that bridge. And there would be a significant widening of that corridor. And the proposal is actually to have both the bike lanes that go in two directions along the east side of that segment of Fifth Street.
Well, if there are no other commissioner comments, I have a few of my own, but thank you both for your information so far. My first question sort of builds off Mr. Sugovsky's question in terms of the West Capitol bike lane delineators. Was there ever a discussion about whether the best option in terms of public safety would be to have that protected bike lane with some sort of delineator as opposed to perhaps painting the pavement green, as I know Capitol Mall does in Sacramento, to delineate the bike lanes from the car lanes?
So the painting would be for the bike lanes, not the buffered area. So there's still an option, and in fact, it would save some money to exclude the vertical delineators and just stripe it with the chevron marks on the ground. So we could exclude them and paint the entire bike lane, but green. But I think the cost of doing those things are probably offset each other. Maybe painting would be a little more because it's not cheap.
Is the rationale for the delineator that it improves public safety of bicyclists along the road, or are they truly just, it could have been an either-or option?
It's a visual feature that...
Physical barrier. It's, I mean, you know, they are, you know, they may be plastic improvements, but they are still physical barriers that people do not, you know, want to run into. If we may purely stripe out and crosshatch out the pavement, that will not, we do not see that as a deterrent, physically keeping, you know, vehicles from crossing that into the bike lane. Buffered bike lanes and any type of barrier, I think it's better than no barrier. Now, of course, we need to be cognizant of the potential conflicts. One of the reasons that, I'm not sure if that was made clear in the presentation, but the reason we brought up the parking, you know, between Sycamore and Jefferson is that is within the Central Business District. Along that segment alone, we have almost 50 driveways. So the driveways are actually a greater conflict for cyclists than anything else because we have so much width there. So whatever we do with striping, blocking out the excess roadway for cyclists, it is going to be fine as long as the cars are not driving in the bike lanes. But we felt that based on what we observed and going through the design process and looking at the accident history, we felt that highlighting, and by the way, green bike lanes are not cheap. they are also expensive to maintain in the future. So we felt that highlighting the conflict zones, will give us that benefit of hopefully reducing potential collisions between cyclists and people, trying to gain access to those businesses.
Thank you. And, I agree. I think it's important to have a protected bike lane. I know for West Capitol in particular, there have been a number of news stories over the past few years that I've been in town where there's been collisions between vehicles and cyclists, vehicles and pedestrians. There's been a number of fatalities. So I think that it is important to have some sort of protection. Mr. Segovsky, though, I think brought up a good point in terms of when things are foggy or dark. Would these delineated barriers have some sort of reflective paint or coating to help drivers see them as they're going by at 45 or perhaps more than 45 along that road?
Yes, most of the ones I have seen are reflectorized. So yes.
Great, thank you. Moving on then, I know that staff requested commission comment and feedback about 3 items in particular. So just going down those 3 items, the first one, parking on West Capitol Avenue. I agree with the staff recommendation. I think that, especially with the new configuration with 2 vehicle lanes and the bike lane, that street parking on West Capitol, doesn't make sense from a public safety issue, and even it's according to the current procedure, it's not allowed anyway. So it doesn't seem to me that there'd be a big impact on users. It seems like there's enough surface parking. So I agree with the staff recommendation to not have on-street parking along West Capitol Avenue. For that second topic about bike lanes on Jefferson Boulevard, I just wanted to confirm, we're speaking about the portion of Jefferson Boulevard between West Capitol and Park, correct? So I also agree with the staff recommendation there. It's so narrow under that freeway overpass, as Commissioner Love said. There's a reason that Caltrans would have to grant us an exception if the city were to go ahead and put a bike lane there. I did have a question, though. The staff recommends putting wayfaring signs to recommend that bikers instead take West Acre or 5th Street. And Mr. Kay mentioned the current Riverfront Street and 5th Street project that would ultimately put a protected bike lane there. What would the timing be for that project when it's complete? Are the options, at a practical standpoint, that if we no longer allow bikers on Jefferson, that 5th Street isn't really an option and West Acre is the only option for the moment?
Well, the ideal bike path for north-south along the eastern side of the city, so to speak, north of the Barge Canal, would be along 3rd Street. So if they were to go to 5th Street, you could cut across Bridge or, one of the smaller, less busy streets in the Bridge district to get to the bike trail. Yes, the timing of Riverfront, the Riverfront Extension Project and the widening of 5th could be a couple of years out, but that's a very limited segment between, 5th Mill and 15th Street.
Thank you. The only question or comment I had then is about the 3rd overall lane configuration. I agree with all of the staff recommendations for the various portions of West Capitol that would be reconfigured as 3 lanes in both directions total versus 4 lanes in both directions total. And I was hoping to open up a conversation among the commissioners for those 3 particular areas that staff is seeking our input from. Are there other thoughts about either 1, the on-street parking for West Capitol, 2, the bike lanes on Jefferson, or 3, the overall lane configuration?
Mr. Chair, as the commission debates potential options, we are seeking a formal recommendation to council with a motion and approval forwarded to the council for consideration.
Thank you. Any commissioner comments? If not, oh, please, Commissioner Regano.
Well, I was just going to move to adopt the staff recommendations.
For all 3 items?
Correct.
We have a motion from Commissioner Rogani to approve all 3 staff recommendations. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second, I believe, Vice Chair Chrisman Kaufman just barely beat Commissioner Love
Just a tad.
just
there.
by a hair.
Yeah.
All those commissioners in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the commission recommends approval of all 3 staff recommendations be carried forward to the city council. Thank you very much. And then, Mr. Zukovsky, I see your hand is raised. I don't know if typically we allow public comment after the 3-minute period. I don't think we typically do, but I hope that if you do have any further comments, that either Mr. Kay or Mr. Ramirez can help with those issues, and if not, we can hopefully see you before us at our next commission meeting. Moving on then the agenda to the General Administration Function Part 2, Item 4A, the Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission calendar. Our next regular meeting of this commission is scheduled for Monday, March 4th, 2019. Item B, reports from city staff.
At this time, there are no reports.
Thank you. Item C, future agenda item requests by the commission. Commissioners, are there any future agenda item requests?
Mr. Chair, if I could clarify, this is the segment where commissioners may request items of interest to be brought forward to the commission. Staff requests that if items are recommended by the commissioners, that they do pertain to items specific to transportation, mobility, and infrastructure, particularly transportation infrastructure or related infrastructure, just to make sure that our staff is focused on those items that would be within the purview of the commission. We can make recommendations to hear items as staff are available to work on those requests and prepare staff reports. We will do so. If at any point requests have to be delayed or unable to be brought, then I will, as secretary, inform the commission of the timeline for us to provide that information.
Having that explanation from Mr. McCoy, are there any future agenda item requests at this time? If not, moving on to item D, adjournment, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
A motion from Vice Chair Chrisman Kaufman. Is there a second?
A second.
A second from Commissioner Polhemus. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.